Welcome back to Pentest Diaries, brought to you by Cobalt.io. My name is Jesse Rivera, and if you have not seen my face before or you have not heard my voice, it is because this is the first time I have hosted this podcast. With me are three experts from the Cobalt Core who have graciously offered up their time so we could dig into Android Pentesting. This isn't my area of expertise, but I find it fascinating that there are 3 billion active Android devices out in the wild currently, so it makes this sort of testing paramount. Our guests will be informing listeners on how they, as professionals, operate while they're going through this OS and use good hack to secure apps. With me are Hirsch, Patricio, and Vinesh. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, JC.
Yeah, of course. And again, these are all expert engineers with the Cobalt Core, and I want to jump right into this. So to start off, let's start from the top. So you're beginning your Android application pen testing process. What is like the first chess move that you make when you're going into these engagements?
So I'll start with this particular point. So whenever I go about testing an Android application, there are several aspects. So let's say engagement is starting. So before the engagement start, I quickly make sure that the some of the protections such as SSL pinning and root detections are in place or not. In case if they are bypassable or not, so that we can timely inform the client that hey, this is not bypassable or seems like it might take some time to bypass it. Could you please provide us with something which is already having bypass? Also, once that thing is sorted out, then I go about checking the functionalities of the application so that I can build my workflow, what to test in terms of the APIs, what to test in terms of dynamic functionalities, and then I go about testing static part, and this is how the pen test layout looks like for me.
Okay, so you kind of get your like ground floor, your sort of like layout of what you're going, and it starts with that SSL pinning.
Yeah, yeah.
Right on.
I can go next. As Harsh, I always use the application as an end user at the beginning of the project because I can get a better understanding about the application, about the functions, about the use cases. Because not always the applications have a documentation, so it's good to know how to navigate or which are the flows of the application to then say and taking notes about this flow. It's really interesting because of blah blah, and this flow it's interesting, and then you can focus on them. And also yes, taking notes or trying to identify the protections in place that the application have, because if they have many protections for anti-root, anti-emulation, or SSL pinning, or encrypted, the code is ciphered, or the traffic is ciphered, you have a step before for testing, because you have to break them in order to then to break the application, or even to make bigger things. So that defines the path of the pen test. Sorry.
All right.
Okay.
Vinesh, you got anything to say?
Yeah, so basically, when I always start my assessment, after understanding the business requirement, right? So first, I need to understand like what is the business case which they are trying to achieve using this application. So then I can build the test cases associated with that business cases, which will help me, like which will help me to create a test cases around related to dynamic testing itself. So I generally use OWASP based mobile application security checklist to perform my assessment, right? And I categorize my initial assessment based on the three different categories. One is static, dynamic, and also a local storage analysis. And in static analysis, basically, I invest my time finding out hard coded values, URL keys, and also the hard coded strings like root keywords or SSL pinning keywords, which is present in the application. So, which will give me the idea whether the application is having SSL pinning or root detection, which I need to focus on during the dynamic testing. So I also review ensure the manifest file, right, which is a key important file while reviewing the Android application. I also review that one to check if there is any misconfiguration which is present in that XML file. If it is there, I will highlight that as an observation itself. And after that, I will try to use a application testing also after installing the same application on our rooted device or the emulator device where I will perform the dynamic analysis going further and try to see like if there is a basic root detection is implemented or SSL pinning is implemented on the application. Then I will try to see like if there is a bypass available, which is known bypass or like advanced bypass. And then further to bypass scenario, then I will perform the dynamic analysis, dynamic testing on same application.
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing here is there's definitely like a need to there's multiple different ways that you're going through this. Either you're walking through it as a user, kind of seeing how the application works on its own, or you're, following something like OWASP fundamental like foundations, or you're just like, hey, SSL pinning, I'm gonna go for that. So that's definitely really insightful to know that these are sort of the places that users can like really just lock into and have like a framework to start. I think that's super important. Another important facet is your sort of tool base, which in each engagement you're using different tools. But I'm curious what are you using in like when you're testing a static environment, or when you're testing a dynamic environment or API? Which are your like go-to tools? And I mean, you can go in any order, that doesn't really matter, but I'm sure people are curious. And even if you could sort of explain what a static, dynamic, or API environment sort of looks like, what the differences are for our users.
Okay, yeah. Each application is different than others, so it's difficult. There are plenty of tools. Of course, it's impossible to list all of them, but yes, you have some tools that you use more frequently, or you use those applications in many cases. First of all, APK man in the middle, because it's really an easy tool to remove the anti-root and the SSL pinning protection. Many of them, not all of them. Frida, this is an instrumentation tool. It is used more for the dynamic stage of the pen test, but you usually use Frida. Also Burp, because also in the dynamic part, it's because when you at the beginning when I browse the application, I always browse or I try to browse the traffic if I can. Sorry, because I can keep all the traffic used by the application, and then I can go and check some things. So that's why Burp is the tool that you always use. APK leaks, the logcat, it's like an application. I could say, which is, it gives you the log from the device. So it's really important to use that. It's not a tool on GitHub, but yes, it's a tool that you can use. And also ADB. I use a lot of ADB and Android Studio to emulate the devices. So those are, I can still talk about, those are the main applications or the main tools that I use in almost each pen test.
And I think it's really lucky in comparison to like iOS pen testing that there are a ton of emulators for Android. I think there's like one, I think it's Cerelium that they use for iOS pen testing, and that's like a paid for service when you have all these other Android emulators. So, and super useful. And yeah, Burp, that is, do you have the professional version, or are you running the standard? You're running professional?
No, yeah, sorry. Trying to unmute. Yes, running the professional, sorry, because if not, you cannot save your work.
Yeah, which is kind of important.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So I will go ahead then.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I prefer using Ep8. Okay, so Ep8 is a framework, like it's a exe based basically tool which has all the tools, right, which is required to perform Android Pentest. So if you see ADB Logcat, like ADB connects, like whatever the tool you required for to perform a basic penetration testing on the Android, it will be there in Ep8. The second tool which I wanted to tell, basically it's the Drowser, which is basically very useful when you want to exploit any intent related vulnerabilities. So the browser I will recommend. The third tool which Patricio already mentioned, which is Frida, which is a runtime analysis tool, which is very useful to perform a dynamic analysis on the Android application. Also, if you want to do like a quick static analysis, automated way like MobSF and Quark is a very good tool to perform a static analysis. The Quark is quick Android review kit, basically, which you tell you basically all the static related issues on the Android applications. The third for like last tool which I will tell like APK leaks, right? So APK leaks is very useful when you want to identify any hard coded keys and the URL which are present in the Android application, which will be useful like when you perform dynamic testing, right? So when you want to see like if these keys are useful in further test cases. And also lastly, like the burp suite is a major tool like which will be used during the dynamic testing itself.
Okay, right on. I'm actually curious about something, not to like taper off too much, but out of static, dynamic, and API testing, which one do you end up spending the most time with? Like the biggest chunk of your time, where do you think you're spending it?
The dynamic part mostly, because the static part, like most of the tools like MovSF and Quick Quark will able to provide you that information. The mostly dynamic part will I focus major of my time itself.
Okay, so then I guess that's where you want to have some of your best like just methodologies and understandings like listed down, so you can cut down that sort of time when you're pen testing. I'm assuming.
Yes, correct, correct.
Yeah, but it's interesting to have a multiple. That's interesting about the how the pen test, the difference between the pen test and the bug bounty. None of them are better than each one. But yes, when you have multiple profiles, I really love. I don't love to read code, a lot of code, but I know that people that really do it, and they do it in a really good way. So they are so good on that. I do that because it's part of the pen test, but I don't. To be completely honest, I really love more doing the dynamic analysis. So having different profiles and different skills in the team, really, it's good to attack the same application from different point of views.
Yes, correct.
I really know people that spend the measure of the time on the static analysis, and I've seen many issues, great findings coming from reading the code.
Right.
Yes, correct.
And that's a great point to make, because I mean you're in a team. You're not like alone, not one person picking apart different things. So you have people who are sent out. Like you have your static analysis person, you have your static or your dynamic analysis person, and your API person, and you're all switching in between some of those roles. So that is the best part about pen testing, is you have a team.
Yeah.
Arsh, did you want to add anything to the tools?
Yeah, so the first thing that I would like to add is like whenever I set for Android pen test, the two things I always make sure that I have an emulator setup. Also, I have a physical device. A lot of time you will face the emulator detection issues, and you don't want to waste your time bypassing those particular things. When it comes to static analysis, JADX is one of the things which I use personally to analyze the source code, read the various files, and see if there is a bifurcation implemented or something like that. Then I go for Nuclei templates, which Nuclei recently introduced, supporting local file scanning. So using those templates, you can speed up a lot of things. In certain scenarios that you are not able to capture the traffic, or it's encrypted or something like that, then you have to rely upon a lot of hooking various methods and something like that. So there are tools like House and runtime security framework which you can utilize in order to perform assessment. And apart from that, I guess pretty much tools are covered. Like Worksuite is one of the major tools, MobSF, and other things like APK leaks. And these are the common tools you will find, I guess, in every Pentest arsenal, whosoever is doing Android Pentest.
Right. And I think that more than anything, like you could talk about tools all day. You can go to like repositories and just like grab a grip of tools and start working on something. But I think what's more important is how you go about like your own framework of implementing them, when you're going to implement them, just sort of having a strategy to how you use them. A toolbox is a toolbox if it's just sitting there, but you're the one who's actually going in, working in on that stuff.
Jesse, I will take advantage while you think on that. It's really important about talking about that Vinesh mentioned before about the OWASP checklist. It really gives you a map. It's not a framework. It's just a YouTube. It's a checkbox, a checklist. Sorry, while you can mark in them what you do and in which category static analysis. So did you do the all the tasks on the static analysis? Because when you start, you see, oh, this one or this key, I can use it, and you go for a path, and then you can forget some tasks that are really important. So I want to highlight that what Vinesh mentioned before about the OWASP checklist, because even when it's not a frame, a methodology, it's really important to have and to always, or not always, but in 2 or 3 days, to take a look again to the checklist to see if you forgot something in the middle of your tasks.
Yeah, and I mean, even to think about it, that's a good way to put it, Patricio, because I mean, these checklists are sort of some of the most important tools because it's well documented, understood walkthroughs of how professionals have done this previously. So it's a tool in and of itself. So thank you for bringing that up.
So just to add to this particular point, like sometimes when you do a pen test, it just get too much complicated. Like you are not sure that from which point you actually started. It's all like puzzle and checklist or whatever mind maps and everything. These are the important factor when you are totally puzzled. So happened with me a lot of times. The application is quite bigger than we actually scoped initially. We thought that we will be able to test in 35 hours, but we might not be able to, and everything is puzzled and we might miss something. So checklist is like, okay, I have to run this tool to find, okay, this might be an issue in static analysis. This might be one thing. Let's say I'm missing some intent related vulnerabilities, some activity related vulnerabilities, or something like that. So this quick reminder, I feel, when you are especially puzzled. And this I guess often happens when you test a mobile application, because most of the time you are frustrated enough to bypass SSL pinning and detection mechanisms. And I guess every mobile pen tester will feel this thing.
And also, I know a boy that made a mad mine. I don't know if you know that guy. Maybe it's here, which is also great to help on that. Isn't that harsh?
Yeah, definitely. That was a nice way to introduce that thing. I appreciate that.
I think that, yeah, no, Harsh, you've actually made a mind map for this in particular, and I was going through it. It's very well thought out, well like documented. I want to be able to link some of the different tools that we've talked about today at the end of the session or in the following material. But I'm curious about something else, which is, what are some of the blockers that you typically run into in Android pen testing? Not every engagement goes smoothly. So I think it's important to let audiences know, the sort of barriers that you have come across or that they might come across when they're doing this particular brand of pen testing.
So I will always, raise my hands for SL pinning and do detection, because they always bother, especially when the client is like, we want you to bypass it. We are not, we want to see how much defense in depth mechanism we have already implemented. So these situations are very critical. Another thing is when you run into a traffic which is encrypted. So I guess Patricio mentioned that initially, that sometimes you will run into encrypted traffic and you cannot understand what is going on. So
Right.
these are certain scenarios, and sometimes if you don't have a physical device, or maybe when you are installing your application rooted device, it just keeps on crashing, and you might need to use an emulator itself or something like that. So these are the few situations which becomes quite complicated. And another major roadblock is sometimes the data sync, or whatever the credential are provided might not be working, or the data linked, or the API calls are not properly getting propagated, or something like that. These are the situations, but are very less frequent. But majorly the SL pinning, root detection, emulator detection, and the encrypted traffic are the major challenges.
It sort of makes me think, actually. Have you ever run into a situation? I think there's like a meme of somebody's code where it's like it's a pigeon and then it starts flying with its head sideways and just goes off into the distance. When you see somebody's code that is like just kind of broken or nonsensical, but it works. How
Yes.
does that situation kind of span out when you're in that sort of engagement? Because it's just like, how does this even work?
So yeah, I totally remember when I was like a very much beginner to Android pen testing. It was, I guess, second or third project for me in an Android application outside the Kubernetes. So the client was pretty much adamant that I want you to bypass the protections because this is your job as a pen tester. We want it completely black box. And then we started like I was learning how to hook the methods and how to trace them, and then further how I can disable them or bypass them to see the things are actually I was like just going all the way south, but it was quite simple. The code itself was just like implement a standalone library or something like that, and all you have to do is to just comment it out. That's it. So pretty much happens that sometimes the application do not implement the integrity checks. So what you can do is you can modify the code and rebuild the application. And if there is no integrity check, the application will work without any errors or failures. And in those scenarios, you can also try to maybe shuffle up the code a bit and then recompile the APK and intercept the traffic or do whatever you want.
Okay. So you're literally fixing the wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always related to the objective or the customer expectations or your own expectations, because sometimes the expectations are here. We have all the protections to in place, so we want to test if an attacker can break those protections. Or there are different objectives, which could be, hey, really, we don't care about the platform protections, which could be Android, iOS, etc. We want to focus on the business logic. Why? Because we are moving money, or we are a home banking, or we are a financial application, and really we want to put the focus there. So also I can the customer or in your own objective could provide you the application without those protections, because they doesn't want you to focus or to spend time on that, because they see it as a wasting time, and not or could be a blocker, because you can spend, I don't know, 5 3 10 days, whatever, and then you go to the next step, and that step was important for the customer or even for you, because in your objective, I don't know, you are trying to defeat an application, and you want to put the focus on that.
Okay. I think that
Yeah, that was definitely a great point. I mean, customer expectations are something that you always have to look for. And I guess, as we mentioned earlier, that you always should ask to the customer initially before the start of pen test that these are the blockers, how you want us to approach this next.
Yeah, and when I was working as a pentester, I always ask the same: how you imagine the report, the final report, or how you imagine if the person was a technical one, how do you imagine the process of the work? And they with that question, with that kind of question, the customer gives you the expectations. What are they looking for? Maybe it could be a pen test because of compliance. They need a pen test this year because of compliance. They don't care about the findings. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
And others wants to you because we're doing this pen test because of, and they gives you the explanation, and you can get and convert the explanation or that information into expectations, and then you can planify your pen test based on the results that the customer wants to see. Because at the end of the day, we're providing solutions. We are not providing, hey, this is the pen test. If you like it, that's great. If you don't like it, I don't care. We want the customer to be happy. And also, all of us, when the customer or is happy, we are happy, because we think our work was provided value to the end user, which is great. Because if not, if it's when I realized that a pen test was because of compliance, I said I wasted my time. I put the focus on that, and you were waiting just for the PDF, and you wanted to see zero vulnerabilities in the PDF, and I was trying to breaking my head to give you more findings. And
So another thing, in another word, just sort of like I have this like hear this a lot when companies will be like, we want this pen test done because we're doing compliance, we're getting audited, like XYZ reason, but always like a checklist and never for like the actual purpose of what a pen test can really do for a company. And have you ever been, as a pen tester, as like a team of pen testers, able to convince them like, wow, this isn't just like something that I can do to check off a box, but also to like help them recognize that this form of security is more than just an audit, more than just a checklist. It's, the
Yes.
ability to see unseen things.
So I think like it is important to have the pen test, right? And the checklist based approach is also important because like then you can actually use the checklist as a coverage section to convince the client. And
Mhm.
from the client angle, sometimes it happens like whatever the issue we report, right? They are not very curious on that, right? Because as per their regulation or as per their organization, they have different risk metrics, right, to categorize this risk.
Mhm.
So based on their client justification, right, sometimes like we report like root detection, but they consider like root detection is not required for the application, right, because we don't want to like do that, right? So they can accept it. It is based on their business and their organization itself. But from the
Right.
coverage part, like we have to report all these things, right? And we can also explain the pentest point of view to them, like by chaining this attack, right? The chaining is very important, right?
Yeah.
If we are able to demonstrate like if the attacks which is mentioned in the checklist are connected to each other and that is causing a major impact, then they might be able to convince, right? We are able to convince them like yes, this pen test is showing them a value stating that because we are able to change this attack, and they will able to fix this issue on the priority rather than like delaying the stuff like the just going accepted risk and everything.
And just for those listening, just for a brief explanation of what chaining is, it's being able to use two different vulnerabilities as one exploit, one larger exploit. And that actually, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and I'm curious, what sort of exploit chains have you personally found in your Android pen testing? Like, I'm hyper curious of that because it takes an adept amount of skill to be able to do that sort of pen testing, that level of pen testing. And since I have you all here, I'd like to hear what you have found personally.
Shall I go ahead? If it is okay.
Yep, sure.
Okay. So basically, like one of the like chaining attack which I have performed it for the one of the application, which is basically you have SSL pinning implemented.
Mhm.
Okay, and then basically we try to bypass the SSL pinning, and then we actually identified like one of the parameter which is actually a parameter which used to identify that user was encrypted, and we don't know like how that encryption was happening. It was actually a session based encryption. Basically every time there is a new session is generated, and
Mhm.
using that session basically they are performing the encryption to generate that unique attribute. So it's not a static attribute
Huh.
anymore. So whenever you do it, basically whenever you log in and when you try to browse your profile section, let's assume that it's a
Right.
profile section, and when you browse it, like there will be a parameter, but it will not be the same for every session. It is random. Okay, and they are actually performing this on the client side. So the next
Okay.
approach is basically like try to obfuscate that code, right? De-obfuscate that code and identify like how the encryption works
Mhm.
on the client side, and then basically perform that attack. So we actually able to find out like what is the function written to encrypt that variable, and then we are able to use that function itself to generate that value at the runtime, like using that session as an input, and
Mhm.
then we created that parameter which is encrypted parameter, and then we forwarded that request, and it was actually idle issues in the application. So basically what they are doing it, they are relying on client side like fix which is
Mhm.
there to fix the server side issue. So it's basically a server side issue, but they actually try to fix it on the client side by using
Oh,
some obfuscation, like it's called insecurity, right,
yeah.
on the client side itself.
That's amazing. That's a great find. What so I'm I want to move on to somebody else who might have another one, but I'm also curious about how long that takes to find a chain like that. It's it's difficult.
Yeah, so basically the one thing is like basically if you use the testing checklist, right? So you know like what are the gap, right? You just need to connect the dots to each
Mhm.
other, right? If you know like the obfuscation is not implemented in the client side, so you know like how these things works. And also like encryption is basically if you see the request itself, like it's going an encrypted parameter itself. So that means you know right something is happening on the client side, not on the server side, because this parameter was never sent from the server side. it was generated at the client side itself. So then you can actually focus on the client side rather than server side.
Okay.
Yeah, it also relies on the how you document everything, because you are sometimes you can change different vulnerabilities or even different weaknesses, which isolated they are just weaknesses, but if you change them, you can convert them into a vulnerability. So if you're not taking notes in a good way, in a tidy way, and also in a really good tool. I use Notion for that. There are plenty of them. You can use whatever you want, but I always put there the code, the endpoints, some images, information that I think that it's important. And then, as Vinesh said before, sometimes you can use just a piece of code. You can use just a key, or you can see that sorry, an endpoint that it could be or it could not have all the protections in place. I remember just one which had just one endpoint, didn't have a properly authorization process, and in that method, in that endpoint, sorry, I could introduce the vulnerability, but it was because having everything documented and how was the flow. So I could say that I could check them. I've tried to inject something here, and here, and I have everything documented. So it's really important to document everything. Always, also, if you think that this is not important, just document it, because maybe in the future you will need that. And if not, if you don't document that, you will forget that.
No, I think documentation is extremely important, especially when you're trying to do correlations on something as sophisticated as Android Pentesting. I think you're right on there. So, Harsh, what about you? You find anything interesting?
Yeah, definitely. So whenever somebody say interesting exploit chains, I remember the pen test I did with Patricio. That was something interesting. So whenever we are doing chaining, our goal is not to just increase the impact of one vulnerability, but how we can basically increase the impact of all the vulnerabilities that we have found so far. And one of the good thing about Android or iOS pen test is that you have the source code at your hand. You can read the code if it is not obfuscated properly, and you can basically get many of the logics, and you can break all of them. Right. So like let's say the application is not having root detection, they are not using code obfuscation, they are not having SL pinning. You can chain all those things together to do greater things. Like let's say a lot of time you will see that the application's traffic is encrypted. But when you will use logcat, you will see that sometimes the application use unencrypted endpoints to that particular logcat thing. So this is something that I found in one of my engagements outside the Cobalt, that the normal burp interaction were getting me the encrypted like endpoints, but when I was testing things with logcat turned on, I was getting the unencrypted, and then I can replace them in the burp suite and try to play around them. At least I was getting some help out of it, right? One of the interesting thing that like if the code obfuscation is not properly implemented, you can try to understand the various code logic. Let's say there is a biometric implementation, you can try to understand the particular code or library which is responsible for that thing. You can try to trace it and then try to change it, disable that particular protection. You can do a lot of things. So yeah, definitely, like I have found like issues related to deep link, which we can further chain with deep link hijacking and performing some interesting attack vectors. So yeah, it's always interesting, but if you have some basic vulnerabilities in Android, you can always convert them into some high severity findings. That I guess something I and Patricia did in one of our pen tests. And that was something a great learning for ourselves as well. That how you can basically showcase a higher impact and justify to the client that why a SSL pinning issue can go to medium or high severity when usually you report in a low. Right, client
Right.
comes and asks you that why you are reporting it a high. You can always come and say that you are not using any kind of code obfuscation. You are logging all the sensitive data, your endpoints are not encrypted, everything is like not in place. So this is why the high severity, if you look from actual the pen test perspective, and why it should be fixed on priority.
I think that that actually makes me think. I think it's a very dynamic thing to sort of like make these correlations and understand these. It's not static. There's a lot of different mechanisms in place that you could try and combine to make it work. I'm wondering, is there currently out there any sort of information on how there are like maybe principal or low level exploit chains that users can use, or information that they can go to study Android exploit chains? Usually, they're not going to be like released out into the public, but you know, is
So
anybody?
in general, when you talk about like tracing the specific methods, like we talked about bypassing the biometrics and something like that. So FRIDA is one of the important tool that I guess all of the Android pen test or iOS pen testers utilize in order to do the hooking and all this stuff. But somewhere you need to, if you are like looking to bypass specific logics, you need to understand its code and try to trace that specific library or function. Okay. In general, for SSL pinning or for root detection, there are some pre-made scripts available for Frida repository. Like a lot of people, it's more like a GitHub for Frida. You will
Mhm.
find a lot of scripts which are handy and useful, and you can learn from those scripts. There are some tutorials on YouTube and I guess on the internet which you can utilize to learn how to basically write some of your own Frida scripts. I guess it utilizes JavaScript, so it's easy for I guess most of the pen testers because we all come from a background where JavaScript is something which we learned because access thing. So yeah.
Yeah, and
And I
I
guess there
mean,
are some like case studies by some of the I guess hackathon report by I don't recall the name exactly. I guess uh, if somebody recalls the name of that Google hacker who like report a lot of security issues with Google application.
mm,
So I guess Bins B3 NAC or something like that. He has a lot of interesting articles, blogs, and videos on how you can chain various vulnerabilities from uh, most of them are rising from the code level. So
mhm,
those are
yeah.
interesting. Those are like not just dynamic issues that you are hitting regular APIs and finding some security flaws, IDOTs or something, but how you are basically utilizing the code to understand it and finding vulnerabilities further in the application.
So I wanted to move on to one of my own sort of curiosities about how the meta of Windows 11 and Android apps running on them natively. What is your general take on that? Because I remember running into InfoSec Twitter somewhere and seeing somebody posting a meme of Rami Malek, his face, and there's like a interpreter that can be ran for reverse shell for Android. So and I understand, like, yeah, there's isolation, and yeah, there's going to be some sort of sandboxing, but how do you feel about it being on, like I said, the billions of devices out there?
I feel a lot of botnet network is gonna come soon because of that. Lots of local previous escalation sandbox escapes I guess gonna come in the market because Android and Windows, you are like basically combining two different operating systems into something and making an isolation layer for that would be an interesting thing to break for a lot of researchers who are actually interested because a lot of guys do research focused on Windows itself, and if you will see that there are a lot of exploits which Windows deny that they are not security concerns. So I guess recently somebody made a GitHub repository saying that these are not actually the exploit or something. That was something I guess 10-20 exploits related to the various local previous escalations and remote code executions in Windows. So yeah, that would be interesting thing to see because now you can you know create an APK or just repackage an APK with some backdoor into it and ask a user because a lot of people once they will have a freedom to download APKs from untrusted sources, they will see a lot of malicious things happening because now you can not just only control the mobile devices but also might be possible that using those particular backdoors you might be able to jump into their Windows environment and do some sneaky stuff over there. So I guess it would be interesting thing to see that how research turns around at this point.
It's an interesting take.
We have not to forget that it means that it will be easier for us for doing security assessments for, for Android
Yeah,
devices.
correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
hope so.
Yeah, but I think like the Microsoft clearly states that they are not going to allow Android APK to be installed on the application at the moment. They are only allowing it from the Amazon App Store at the
Right.
moment. So might be they are controlling this environment to not to allow untrusted APK to be run. But if
Mm.
they are willing to like go ahead with that APK approach, yes, there will be like lots of sandbox escape will be happening because currently also, if you see like Ubuntu, right, how the system works in Ubuntu, right, on Windows 10, it's basically having access to your local directory as well, right? So same for the Android also. So if even they do the sandboxing, something will be accessible by that Android environment, right, which is hosted on the Windows platform. So there could be a like credential theft attack could be possible, right? Like running a Mimikatz on that system and then like taking account, like taking a dump of the Windows lasses file, and then you can actually export it to like your server itself. So that could be a possible scenario in going further.
I think I was curious about a while back. You were talking about the botnets that might come from this in particular. I was wondering where that mindset or that the line of thinking comes from your perspective.
So, in my opinion, Windows is like, always been an interesting factor for a lot of people who are mostly into research domain. So whenever you see a new Windows update come, people are like, okay, Windows is not giving updates to fix issues, but to release some new issues, right? So after, release of a new Windows update or so they have this pattern, I guess they release the patches on Tuesday, okay, on a specific date of a month. So what happens is like after that release, you will see a lot of new exploits coming to the market. So now, when you are, as Vinesh mentioned, that for the Ubuntu itself, that the privileges are high basically from when you are installing Ubuntu on the Windows system. Now, since Android using more of a Linux system itself, it might be interesting to see that how the isolation is something Windows is taking care of. If these are not proper, it would be easy to break into that sandboxed environment, or you can say break from that isolation. And let's assume that if I am able to find a way where I can use apps or APKs outside the Amazon Marketplace or something and install it on that Windows 11 support Android thing. Now that would be an interesting point where an attacker can basically bind some malicious code with the Android application or APK and then comes and when a user install it. Because what happens, let's say a person wants to download a premium version of an Android file. What they go and check is like, how can I download a free like a premium version for free? And usually those botnetted or those backdoored applications will be highlighted on the top of the Google search or something like that. So basically it's drive-by download attack, that you are going to the that particular attacker's place on your own, and then you are downloading that APK, and without your knowing or without your knowledge, the things are getting sorted or installed. And but if this actually happens in real, that would be a big, tragedy. Just like coronavirus, it would be a digital virus thing for, because still a majority of people are using Windows as their basic operating system. And since most of the people are getting upgrade to the new version who are using Windows 10 or something, it would be quite interesting to see that how things are going to shape in. But again, depends that how Windows is isolating those layers, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right, or even like finding the processes that those are hidden in.
Yeah.
I want to sort of like wrap up today with, in my mind, a very important question. Why is Android pen testing, why is it important? Like, why should people be doing it more? I mean, like I said earlier, 3 billion devices is, if you compare that to the population of Earth, that's almost like 42%. And that's my take on it. But from your perspective as pen testers, why is it important?
For me, it's like in any other platform. It's like when you're a company developing an application. It's like, and you don't do a pen test of your to your application. It's like you are in a room with the lights off and you're walking. Maybe you can drop, or maybe not. Maybe you can break your head, or maybe not. But you are with the light off. So when you do a pen test, it's like turning on the lights, and you can see the problems because the problems are still there. They didn't disappear when you turn the lights off. So you can see them and you can address them, which is the most important. Also, addressing them, it's like accepting the risk. Accepting the risk is addressing them because you know that, and you accept that you have that those vulnerabilities or issues, and you have mitigations in place, or not, or maybe not. So that is the main difference. So remember that you can drop in both scenarios, but in only one of them, you can see what's next to you, and you can take decisions based on the information that you have.
Definitely a great point, Patricia. So, according to me, why it's important is like we are like moving towards accessibility things. Let's say I don't prefer using Instagram on the Instagram's web application. Rather, I prefer using it on the mobile applications. And I have Android device, so I'm using it on Android application. Now, whenever you are using different applications as a company, you are providing, let's say, mobile application, you are providing web application, you are providing thick client. It's your responsibility to handle the user's data. A lot of time, not all the APIs are same in web or mobile, right? A lot of time you will see that the microservice architecture for the web application, Android or iOS application might differ a bit, and this difference might introduce a lot of vulnerabilities. So if you go and check a lot of HackerOne reports or read a lot of blogs, people will tell the stories that I was testing the web application and I saw the same feature on the mobile application, so it clicked in my mind that why not just test the mobile application, see if the endpoint is a little bit different or the request might be going a little bit different to find a security issue. And this happens in most of the cases, right? So since we are most of moving towards hybrid application, like write the code once and compile it for a multiple platform, this raises a lot of security concerns as well, because handling different platform using a single code might be a little complicated and you might leave a lot of loopholes. And another thing is like you know people are using agile frameworks these days, so like making a release go faster is the priority rather than the security, right? So a lot of companies are using DevOps but not DevSecOps, and this is where external security thing comes into the picture, and that's why. So simple question is like, even if the companies are using DevSecOps, why a lot of tickets are coming from bug bounties or from pen test, or a lot of companies for which we do pen test are having internal security team. So they are good enough, obviously, but the approach, the mindset of a particular pen tester differs in this particular thing. So similarly to the web application, since we are moving fastly towards accessibility thing, towards mobile applications more, because we want things on the go. And the first thing I check in the morning is the mobile application and see that how many messages I got on Cobalt, Slack, or how many messages I have on Instagram or on Twitter or something. So yeah, handling data and user safety is important. So you have to go through the mobile application pen test.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Considering most people have a phone, most people wonder whether or not they're secure, and most people, they hope that the companies that are releasing these applications are covering them. So it's people who are pen testing that really like push that barrier forward to know that there are unseen things that could potentially be discovered. Vinesh?
Yes, I agree that the pen test is very important aspect, right, in terms of identifying the weakness in the application, right, and also it provides the client as an assurance stating that what is the security posture of that application. Rather than being said is basically currently we are seeing like most of the Android pen tests. Why? Because like there are most of the end users, right, which are like they are buying the Android phone easily rather than buying a laptop, right, because the laptop cost is like larger, right. The money which need to invest on the like laptop is much higher, like, and in the case of Android application it's like it's readily available, right, so whoever is having the mobile, they can install this application and the accessibility will be there. So that is where like it's most of the Android application is currently focusing on like storing and processing most of the sensitive information related to that customer, right. And the pen test is very important in that perspective because we are covering larger number of audience rather than smaller number of audience in the case of other application, right, web application. Because we generally see like even the student is having the Android application, like a mobile phone, Android mobile phone, where they are installing the application. That is the thing, like I'm morely concerned like the Android testing pen test is very much important in current scenario.
Yeah, I think that we can all agree on that. I think that a lot of the different marks that we hit today stem from the issue that there are multiple different applications that are going through different like dev life cycles that aren't being secured maybe well enough, and they are replicating at a faster pace. Hershey mentioned that there's hybridization that's happening as well. I just want to start off by thanking all of you here today for giving your time. There's a lot of insights that we've had for like tools that we've been using or that you're using currently that our audience could use as well. Sort of your methodologies on how you run through the beginning of your pen test. The differences between what you're using when you're using tools for dynamic, static, API, and overall, I'm just sort of happy that I had the experience to like learn with all of you today. Is there anything else that was maybe on your mind before we set out for the end of this show?
It was great talking to all of you, and again, a great learning insights for me as well from hearing the different approaches. So once again, thank you, Cobalt and Jesse, for providing this opportunity, and thanks to my co-mates Vinesh and Patricio for always being wonderful and awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same here. Thank you for the time and for getting a great time. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for all your time. Like I really love the conversation, and also like I was able to share my knowledge and also like gain the knowledge which are actually you already shared during this entire conversation. So thank you.
I think maybe someday we should actually sit down and go through a pen test engagement or full pen test engagement so we can like actually have something up on screen so we can just like hack together and maybe get some more insights from doing that. Sound like a good idea?
Yeah,
Yep,
All right.
definitely. I'm
Well,
gonna ask
again,
Cobalt for the tickets.
you all have like my greatest thanks for being here today. I appreciated being the host, and hopefully at some point we can have you on the show again. And happy hacking.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Happy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Bye bye.
Hi there. Thanks for listening to Pentester Diaries, a podcast brought to you by Cobalt.io. We hope you enjoyed and welcome you to subscribe, share, or leave a review wherever you tune in from. You can catch more episodes by following Cobalt on LinkedIn and Twitter. Stay tuned for more episodes.